I guess it's all right.
It looks good.
Yeah, it's fine.
Let's bring that down just a little.
Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. Everyone ready? And I am very proud to be joined here by my colleagues who have worked long and hard with us on this particular issue. Mayor de Blasio and I have talked about Sandy relief since he came into office, and we believe this will be the first of a bunch of announcements in terms of making Sandy better. And our new head of NYCHA, Ms. Olatoye, is Shola Olatoye, is a blessing, I think, for all the public housing residents, the 400-some-odd thousand?
400,000 and 200,000 leased houses.
400,000 public housing residents and 200 leased. Okay, well, we all know that Superstorm Sandy is about 16 months behind us. But for many in our city's public housing, the hardship is still real. It took too long, but in recent months, the city and the federal government have made real progress in addressing our situation. We've been able to help reduce the agency's debt. We're fighting for millions of dollars to make the properties more resilient so that, God forbid, when the next storm comes, they'll be able to tackle it much better than they were able to the last one. The backlog of repairs is slowly but surely being cleared. But we're here today to mark one of the biggest steps forward. We're here to announce a major $100 million plus announcement. You see, 60 boilers serving 110 NYCHA buildings were damaged by Sandy. The damaged boilers affect more than 8,800 units, tens of thousands of residents. And since the storm, NYCHA residents have been relying on temporary boilers to heat their homes. However, they're not up to snuff. During the recent cold, residents complained of lack of hot water and heat. And to top it off, they're really expensive. To rent these boilers is NYCHA is spending $3 million a month. So far, they've spent $56 million on 24 temporary boilers. For an agency already in debt that has so many other needs, this is unacceptable. In the meantime, FEMA negotiations for permanent boilers have been taking far too long. NYCHA was not able to move forward until they got a specific commitment of funding from FEMA. We all know the FEMA process is very, very long in two ways. First, what FEMA does is say, go spend the money and then we'll negotiate how much we'll reimburse you. That's not acceptable because FEMA can lowball you and then you're out. So that doesn't make sense. And second, what we wrote into the Sandy bill was not just to replace, but to make resilient, to make them stronger when, God forbid, the next flood occurs. And that's new for FEMA, and it takes a long time for them to come to these, on how to do that, to come to a sort of place how to do that. And let's face it, the boilers that we're replacing were not spanking new to begin with. They're ancient, seriously damaged by saltwater storm surge. It would have been an outrage to do what FEMA originally wanted to do, just have them repaired, only to break down again in the near future. And that's what FEMA first said, because FEMA's watchword is just repair. Bring them back to the way they were. These are ancient boilers. They're old, they're expensive, and they're not reliable. The negotiations went back and forth between FEMA and NYCHA, and meanwhile, thousands of NYCHA residents are being impacted. This is no way to live. Red tape was keeping the lights off and the water cold. It's an unacceptable situation. Hardworking families live here. They're trying to make ends meet. It's not fair after a hard day at work to come home to a cold apartment with no hot water. You can imagine the frustration. So today, we've worked long and hard with the city administration over the last several months, with both the mayor and Ms. Olatoye and Alicia Glenn and many others. And today, the mayor and I are pleased to announce we've cut through the red tape and we've brought this situation now to a speedy end. FEMA has done just about everything we want. They've agreed to provide funding based on estimates of NYCHA. In other words, when a certified engineer says it will cost $1.3 million to replace this boiler, FEMA will give the city the 1.3. What they used to do is haggle. Well, maybe we'll give you 900,000. Maybe we'll give you 700,000. How do we know you couldn't have found a cheaper boiler? We can't wait for that. They'll just, once a certified engineer that the city has already, they've hired a bunch, says this is how much it costs, FEMA will reimburse. That's the news. Last month, when I learned about how stalled these negotiations were over this kind of trivia, we sat down with top officials from FEMA as well as Shola Olatoye. The goal of the meeting was to hammer out a clear path, and I have to give a lot of credit to Brad Kaiserman. He has been promoted. He's sort of in charge of the whole New York metropolitan area. I'm not sure his exact title. Do you remember? Me either, but we'll get it for you. But he decided to cut through the red tape. As a result of our agreement, FEMA will be able to replace the boilers quickly, far earlier than the 2016 proposed deadline. Here's the agreement. First, FEMA, as I mentioned, FEMA will pay for NYCHA's cost estimates for boiler replacement as long as they're provided by independent licensed engineers. That is point one, and I explained that. Second, they're going to provide the full replacement for the much-needed boilers. They're not going to require a cost share from the city. Often FEMA says we'll pay 75%, we'll pay 90%. They're going to pay the full 100. And lastly, FEMA will reimburse NYCHA for the full cost of the temporary boilers. So the $56 million that's already been spent and the tens of millions more that will have to be spent until the new boilers are in place, the federal government will reimburse NYCHA for it, and NYCHA is so hard-pressed that this money would have gone down the drain, and now they'll be able to use it for other things. As I mentioned, all of it's going to happen on an expedited timeline. Instead of the existing goal of replacing boilers in 2016, NYCHA and FEMA are now committed to getting a grant agreement in place early this year. We'll get the final language from FEMA, Mr. Kaiserman has said, in 2-3 weeks. And NYCHA has said that they can begin to let the contracts out shortly thereafter, and I believe they expect construction to begin as early as 6 months from now. The bottom line is that NYCHA residents deserve ready, available heat and hot water. They're not asking for something crazy, something unreasonable. They're asking for the most basic of necessity, and now they're going to get what they deserve. Reliable heat and hot water are on the way. And so now I want to turn it over to Mayor de Blasio. We have had a great collaboration on a whole bunch of different issues, and he's finally, with the new commissioner, he has been able to he's beginning to turn this troubled agency around. So after the mayor, we'll hear from NYCHA Chair Shola Olatoye. Mayor.
Thank you, Senator.
And thank you for the tallest podium I have ever spoken from.
Well done, sir. I want to spend a moment on the names of the colleagues I stand with because they are meaningful for this occasion. First of all, Senator, I have been a connoisseur of many of your speeches, so I have great memory about them. I'm not going to do the inauguration speech in Ben Franklin. We've heard that. But I know you've talked about the origin of your last name, and it means guardian. What's the original name?
It's called Schumer.
Schumer.
It's a Hebrew word for policeman or guardian.
All right. So Schumer means guardian. From the perspective of the people of New York City, this has been our guardian in Washington. And I say this from the bottom of my heart. You know, you're hearing today just one example of what Senator Schumer does for us. And he does it not just for public housing residents, not just for homeowners affected by Sandy. He does it for people who ride mass transit. He does it for people who need to be protected in terms of public safety. He does it across the range of issues that affect this city. The reason New York City is able to do so many things we do is because Senator Schumer has stood up, even when Washington originally did not want to help. Sometimes he's persuaded forcefully, using his brains and his seniority. He has persuaded Washington to do what it should have done anyway. So I just want to take a moment, since this is one of the first times we've been able to stand together on an issue like this, to say I cannot thank you enough, and every day we're benefiting from your efforts in Washington. Now, our new NYCHA chairwoman I must admit, I may have led the senator astray on name pronunciation, because I said the other day that it was Olatoye, and then I remember it's Olatoye, right? So, Senator, I failed you as a linguist. Olatoye. I apologize. That was my mistake. But now your first name, what's the whole first name? Oyeshola translates as?
God's gracious gift.
God's gracious gift. So you're God's gracious gift to New York City and Washington. You're God's gracious gift to New York City at NYCHA. We thank you, Shola, for your great, great work, and welcome aboard. I want to thank our fantastic general manager of NYCHA, Cecil House. You have to stand where people can see you. You too, our Deputy Mayor Alicia Glenn, you have to actually be where people can see you. All right. And I want to thank our hosts today, Greg Morris, the President and Executive Director of the Stanley Isaacs Neighborhood Center, and I want to thank Rose Bergen for being not only a resident of this wonderful development and a leader of this development, but a leader of all public housing residents in Manhattan South. Thank you for your leadership. Now, Senator Schumer looked at this situation and understood that if we were to wait and let the bureaucracy rule the day, our people would continue to suffer. And he laid it out perfectly. People without heat, who've been without heat for a long time. People who went through all of the pain of Sandy, and they're still living it in so many ways. We don't accept that reality. We know we have to help people back on their feet. And we know that sometimes you have to cut through that red tape and do something differently. And when the senator looked at the situation, not only in this development, but others in the Lower East Side, in Coney Island, in the Rockaways, all over the city, tens of thousands of people affected, he swung into action. And he knows, and I know, and Shola knows, and all our colleagues know, that NYCHA has borne the brunt of so many other challenges before Sandy came along. Years and years in which a federal government that doesn't share the values of all of us up here moved away from investments in NYCHA. And then Sandy only added to the challenge. But now, because of resolute action by Senator Schumer, these boilers will be replaced, repairs will be made, the FEMA rules that could have stood in the way have now been addressed aggressively, creatively. And I have to tell you one thing I love about Senator Schumer, he's not interested in delays. You have a noble impatience, sir. And so, Chair Olatoye went to Washington just last week, and upon hearing some of the specifics that we were facing, Senator Schumer immediately pulled together FEMA and NYCHA leaders and made sure that the pipeline of recovery dollars opened up. You've heard it's 110 separate buildings will benefit all over the city. Tens of thousands of people will benefit. And we won't continue the madness of spending money for temporary boilers when we could actually fix the core problem. Bottom line of this announcement today, so thanks to Senator Schumer, we will have more repairs sooner. More people will be served better. A lot of the taxpayers' money will be saved because we'll be making serious solutions, not just Band-Aids. And this is one of many steps we will take, not only to serve the residents of our public housing developments, but to serve homeowners and so many others who were affected by Sandy. This is a powerful and important announcement today, and you're going to be hearing a number of others in the next week or two. Let me just offer a few quick words in Spanish, and then I'll bring our chairwoman forward. Again, want to say a special thank you to our Deputy Mayor Alicia Glenn, who's been also focused and laser-like in her interest in getting this done, and our General Manager, Cecil House, who saw us through the Sandy aftermath and continues the great work of getting NYCHA back on its feet. En español, el anuncio de hoy es el resultado de un esfuerzo coordinado con el senador Schumer para hacer arreglos que mejorarán la calidad de vida de miles en NYCHA que fueron afectados por la supertormenta Sandy. Estas nuevas calderas asegurarán agua caliente y calefacción. I can do this one. Calefacción. Y thank you, I'm working on it. Y traerán paz mental a miles de residentes de vivienda pública. This could be a inner circle skit. It really could. With that, our new chairwoman of NYCHA, Shola Olatoye. I did it wrong again. Olatoye. Second syllable, I can do this. Shola Olatoye. Did I get it?
Very good.
Okay,
Very
did
good,
it sound
Mr.
Yoruba?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Senator Schumer. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank our hosts here at the Stanley Isaacs houses, Greg and Rose. It's wonderful to see you again and to meet you. I'll be brief and just say today is about restoring basic service to our tenants that they deserve and that we all expect. New Yorkers are lucky to have a senator, a guardian, and a mayor, a champion, who are deeply committed to public housing and its residents. On behalf of the hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers who depend on NYCHA, we thank you for your steadfast support. Sandy was a devastating storm, not only for our city, but for more than the 80,000 public housing residents that were affected. The water has long since receded, but our work still continues. We are committed to rebuild a stronger and more resilient system. And so I thank you for your leadership, for your help and support, and for your ongoing commitment to New York City's Public Housing Authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you're the expert on Sunday press conferences.
Yes, we'll follow your lead.
We're watching. We're going to take.
I think
notes
I've been
here.
doing them when the mayor was in college. Questions? First on this subject. Yes.
I'm just wondering, FEMA is having problems with its finances too, so how do you balance one agency, city agency with financial hardships?
Well, the bottom line is the Sandy money, the Sandy relief bill we passed was very generous. And while FEMA is having some problems with some of their other finances, there is more than adequate money to do this. So the two don't conflict. We have our $60 billion Sandy package, which FEMA will tell you gives them enough money to do all the things that are needed. It was a generous package. We worked hard on it. Now they are, with all these other disasters in other places, getting kind of stretched, but that doesn't affect our Sandy money. Yes.
In what way will these new boilers be resilient and withstand the next?
Okay. First, they are going to be more water resistant, and we will be able to build protections, either build them up higher, so if there are several feet of water that they won't get flooded, or build walls around them that are waterproof. So the resilience is not just within the boiler itself, but when the new boilers are put in terms of structure, they are much more protected from a, God forbid, another flood.
About how many apartments have been without heat or hot water since the storm? Is there any idea?
Well, the number of units that we're talking about today affected by these boilers is about 8,000 units. Now that they are being served by temporary boilers, and just to add to the senator's comments, in addition to replacing these boilers to be more resilient, we're moving from what currently oil burning boilers to actual natural gas. So not only are we talking about cleaner boilers in terms of their overall operations, but also resilient and being able to resist a future weather event. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to let the senator do that because he is the guy who made this possible. So
Well,
let him
they're
do the
going to,
overview.
in about 3 weeks, FEMA will sign an agreement with the city, and then the city will begin first drawing up plans and then installing these new storm-resistant boilers. We hope that will begin within 6 months, and the amount of money reimbursed will be whatever the licensed engineers say these cost. So we avoid the haggling of how much to pay, and that leads to months and sometimes years of delay.
Right. There's no question that this was not an ideal situation, and we've certainly heard from our tenants to that fact, and that's why this news is so welcomed to allow us to begin the replacement of these temporary boilers to more resilient boilers for the future.
And I want to say the city did the best it could, but temporary boilers are never as good as permanent as boiler, and we're going to get top-of-the-line boilers, so it'll be a much better, more reliable, and more cost-effective way to heat the buildings, as well as Ms. Olatoye mentioned, more environmentally friendly because it's natural gas, not oil.
Can I add that, you know, we all, after Sandy, said that this is, look, it was the worst natural disaster in the history of New York City. And it was devastating to so many, and we said at the same time we had to find a way not only to bring people back, get them on their feet, help them move forward, we had to find a way to right some wrongs in the process, because there was going to be an opportunity to do some things better, to not only make our buildings more resilient, but make the lives of our people better. And what the senator has done is part of that. It's literally going to take buildings that had boilers, and many of them very old, many of them dysfunctional. Cecil can, I'm sure, speak about volumes about the challenges of an aging infrastructure at NYCHA before the storm. Now we're going to have better service for our tenants, cleaner boilers, you know, the kind of infrastructure that can actually last us going forward. So out of this tragedy, there's been a very concerted effort to find a way to create some good, and the senator really made that happen here.
And just one other point here. It's more than 8,000 people in these actual apartments, but it's going to help all of NYCHA because there's not money going down the drain for something it doesn't need, and it'll help the taxpayers of New York because we're getting 100% reimbursed, so it's not going to come out of city tax levy.
On this topic? On this topic. Senator, I'll do my auction style. Going once, on topic. Once, twice, 3 times. To any of us, off topic.
Mr. Mayor, I have to ask, why do you run the retreat today from the protesters?
You know, we believe this is a very important moment for our city. What the senator has achieved here, what it's going to mean for tens of thousands of public housing residents. And that's what we're here to talk about. We wanted to make sure we could do it in a way that allowed us to tell people a very, very important new development. I respect the folks who are protesting, and I've said that, you know, I believe in a 5-borough plan in terms of the marine transfer stations. I am going to move forward with that plan. It's what I said all last year I was going to do. But we're going to work with each community to make the plan better for the neighborhood. There's a lot we can do to improve the situation, the experience people are going to have locally. We're committed to working with community leaders. And they have every right to make their voices heard, but we wanted this important news to get out to the people of New York City, particularly the tens of thousands of tenants affected by this news. Yes?
Are you in the process of extending an olive branch to Governor Cuomo over the charter school?
You know, again, I've said this several times, I have been a friend of the governor's for almost 20 years. I had the honor of working with him in the Clinton administration. We've worked together on any number of topics in recent weeks. We're going to work together on education. I know he's committed to getting something important done on pre-K and after school. We're going to work together on the whole spectrum of education. One of the things I was trying to say earlier today is we want to help all parts of the educational system, our traditional public schools, our charter schools. By the way, there's lots of ways we can work with our religious schools, and that's what we're doing with our pre-K and after school plan. So I know the governor's committed to that, and I know we'll work together productively. Oh, wait, let me do media first.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Have you had any discussions with Eva Moskowitz about where to put the 194 students?
We've been very clear in everything we said publicly, and we've reached out to folks who represent Success Academy that we're going to make sure there's a quality location in the right geographical area for them so that those 194 kids can be served well starting in September. So there's been a regular discussion going on as we get the details together. But we're very committed to making sure those kids get a great education this September, and it's in a facility that really works for them.
Follow up to that, Mr. Mayor. Have you sat down personally with Ms. Moskowitz, and would you be willing to? Is that something that you think would be helpful in this situation?
You know, I think what's helpful right now is to get these kids situated, which we're committed to doing, and to make sure that we work on the overall situation of public education, as I outlined earlier today. A lot of folks in the administration have been reaching out to Success Academy and other folks in the charter movement, and we're very open to working with them. It doesn't come down to any individual personalities. It doesn't come down to who has had which conversation with who. It gets to more essential point. We are committed to working with charter schools. They are part of the lineup, and there's a lot of discussion going on now with a lot of different parts of the charter movement to make sure we work well together. I don't think so. Look, I understand that's part of what I was trying to talk about this morning is sometimes the public discourse focuses on personalities or on conflict, and I actually think misses a lot of the essence, and we have to do better, all of us. By the way, I think elected officials, part of what I said this morning, I believe it, elected officials, we are the ones that have the most to do to improve both the discourse and the clarity of our vision for our people. My bottom line today is you can't have a city where people think that their neighborhood public school won't provide them with a good education. That's just unacceptable. That's been a sad reality for decades. We're not going to allow that to continue. So we're going to act on the basics, things like early childhood education, extending the school day through after school, teacher retention. This is a huge issue. Attracting and keeping quality teachers, which we're failing to do right now. Intensifying the role of parents in the education of their children. There's so many foundational things we have to do, and we're committed to doing them so that, in fact, the goal is that wherever you live, whatever your zip code, there will be a quality public school for you. That's the track we're on. Now, we're going to work with everyone in that. When it comes to the Albany dynamic, I know the governor shares those values, and I know we're going to get something done on pre-K and after school. So people may have different views. Obviously, I thought the tax was a good idea. Others don't. That's fine. That's democracy. But the bottom line is we're going to get something historic done on pre-K, and it's going to improve the lives of our children, and the same with after school. And it's going to start to get at the root causes and make some of the foundational changes we have to make. That's where you're going to find the unity, because something big is about to happen.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
can you comment about the 10 suicides that have happened over the year coming to Virginia?
Yeah. It's very troubling, and Senator and I were talking about this earlier. This is a larger societal phenomenon. It is deeply troubling. It's not just in our public schools. We're seeing it at the college level, too. And I think it speaks to a couple of things. I think it speaks to the fact that we have to reach our children earlier in every way and give them hope and give them opportunity. I really believe early childhood education is crucial to the whole equation because it is part of putting kids on a productive, positive path early and not letting them feel like they can't make it. I also believe we have to approach mental health very differently. And one of the things that we've talked about is over the next 4 years, creating 100 community schools. The community schools model is very powerful. It was developed by the Children's Aid Society. Richard Bury, our new deputy mayor, who's working on our strategic policy initiatives, was part of the leadership of, was the CEO and president of Children's Aid Society, and is taking this idea and putting it into action. You go to the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, this is now the model for all their schools. Mental health services in every school. Physical health services in every school. It's an extraordinary model. It treats the whole child. It brings the family into the school building to address a host of challenges. And that's the model we're going to move steadily toward, because I think a lot of the challenges that manifest tragically in these suicides can be caught early if we're focused. Yes. Okay, I'll take that, and you get the one for the senator. How's that for a deal? No, those 194 kids will have a great building to go into in September, period. We're absolutely committed to it. Those children matter to me. They're all our children. And, you know, as I said earlier, if I failed to communicate that, that's my mistake. But I think what's clear is education is the top priority of this administration. The number one goal I put forward last year was achieving full-day pre-K for every child in the city and achieving after-school programs for our middle school kids. We are going to intensify every effort to improve our schools, and charter schools are part of that. They are part of that effort too. And those 194 kids matter to me, and we're going to make sure they have a great school building to be in September.
On Ukraine and Crimea, the people vote on Monday, what you're expecting, and the possibility of tougher sanctions and arms to Ukraine.
Well, look, the Senate, bipartisan, feels very strongly that we need to give the IMF the funding and reform they need so that they can at least put some real money on the table to match what Putin is offering the Ukraine. And so far, I think we'll have the votes for it in the Senate. John McCain, Lindsey Graham, people like that have joined Democrats in supporting that. The question is the House. We're not sure if the House will actually support any kind of IMF funding, and that would be a shame. Here we are with Ukraine trying to be free, trying to break from Putin. Putin puts a whole lot of money on the table. Obviously, there's gas and subsidies and all of that. And if we say no, I mean, I don't understand why our colleagues in the House would block it. It does not make sense to me.
All right.
I also asked about tougher sanctions, and Ukraine wants arms.
Yeah, well, first, in terms of sanctions, I think sanctions work best when they are done multilaterally, and there are careful discussions going on with the Germans and the EU about what the next step should be. The sanctions that have been put in place already have had a significant effect. If you look at the Russian stock market, the value of Russian currency and things like that, it's having an effect. So I think despite his bluster, Mr. Putin knows that further sanctions will have a detrimental economic effect on Russia. And, you know, militarily, they have the upper hand. They have a large army right on Ukraine's border. Ukraine itself has a very weak army. But economically, certainly over a longer period of time, we have real leverage. Don't forget, the Russian economy is the size of Italy's. It has so shrunk that it doesn't have the strength to withstand a lot of the kinds of sanctions that we would put in place. And the financial sanctions are probably the most effective of all.
But some of your colleagues want to send arms as Ukraine.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait to be briefed by the administration to see what good that would do. As I said, there's a huge Russian army, there's a very weak Ukraine army, and my instinct is that economic sanctions will probably be more effective in keeping Ukraine free.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.